everybody. Welcome to today's chapel. I want to start us off by reading a verse. This is Psalm 5:11. But let all who take refuge in you be glad. Let them ever sing for joy, and may you shelter them, that those who love your name may exalt in you. So just as we sing this song, I hope you all can take it to heart that God is always for you. He's always protecting you, defending you, no matter what you're going through. If you're stressed with classes or anything with relationships with family, He wants the best for you. And so I pray that you can just rest in that today as we sing this song, Defender. You go before I know that you've even gone to win my war. You come back with the head of my enemy. You come back and you call it my victory. Oh. You go before I know that you've even gone to win my war. Your love becomes my greatest defense. It leads me from the dry wilderness. All I did was praise. All I did was worship. All I did was bow down. All I did was stay still. Seek to find your truth. Your mercy is the shade I'm living in. You restore my faith and hope again. All I did was praise. All I did was worship. So much better. picked up all my pieces, put me back together. You are the defender of my heart. When I thought I lost me, you knew where I left me. You reintroduced me to your love. You picked up all my pieces, put me back together. You are the defender of my heart. Hallelujah, you have saved me so much better way. And hallelujah, great defender, so much better way. Hallelujah, and hallelujah, you have saved me so much better way. And hallelujah, great defender, so much better way. All I did was praise. All I need to do is worship. Lord, I will just bow down. I'm just gonna stay still.
Today's speaker is Timothy Eldred, who's the president of Endeavor Ministries, one of the longest existing youth ministry organizations with its roots dating back to 1881. Tim is a veteran youth pastor, author, speaker, and consultant, serving nationally and globally as a leading advocate for empowering young leaders. His overall challenge to audiences is to see beneath the surface of what others show you and practice empathy. Tim makes his home in rural Michigan, so you can follow him on social media at Timothy Eldred, or if you want to check him out on his website, timothyeldred.com, you could do so. So take it away, Tim.
It was 30 years ago, not this month, might have been October, middle of October, I think. Either way, I woke up and the wind was blowing the rain sideways. Now, I knew at that 5 a.m. moment, just looking out across the sky, that there was no way I was getting on an airplane this morning. I was planning on getting on an airplane that morning, but I just knew, looking at the wind and the weather and the rain and the low clouds or the ceiling, that there's no way the plane that I was taking from Lansing, Michigan to Louisville, Kentucky was leaving. I was wrong. And so I made my way to the airport and got on the plane and buckled myself in thinking, this is stupid. I mean, my dad had flown, and so I had been in lots of small airplanes, and this was not like a large commercial plane. This was a small commercial planes when planes used to have props. And so I got on this prop plane, and it reminded me of my dad's plane, flying and shaking and bouncing and getting sick in the back seat and puking in a bag, and then wondering, what do you do with a bag of puke at 2,000 feet in the air? Well, if you're good, you can get that little bag out the little vent window, and then, I know, disgusting, but I did it. I just always wanted to know where it hit, you know? Like, bag of puke from 2,500 feet. You thought hitting a June bug in your car was bad. So I'm reliving a moment, sitting on a plane, buckled in, wondering why we're flying in this storm. As I sat there, I took my seatbelt off as we took off, and the plane is shaking, and I'm not feeling very well, and I'm getting cold, and I'm getting a bit clammy, and I'm sweating. And so I think I'm going to be sick. And so I reached up, and even though it was a small plane, it had those little, bursts of air that's like air conditioning, not. And I blew it on myself and took my seatbelt off and sat back in my seat. And as I sat there getting more and more sick, losing muscle control, I began to slide out of my seat. And I couldn't push myself back up. And not only was I sliding out of my seat, but I was drooling. And so it's embarrassing. And the ladies sitting next to me, who are like 97, they're looking at me and they say, "Honey, are you okay?" And I said, I don't fly very well. And so by the time we landed in Louisville, the flight attendant had propped me back up in my seat and put on my seatbelt. And the ladies next to me felt so bad. And they were telling me I would be okay. And so they carried me off the plane, like literally, with my arm around a flight attendant. And the other flight attendant carried my bag and took me into the Army Reception Center for Fort Knox, Kentucky, that's in Louisville. As we flew in, I was going into the Army that morning. Talk about embarrassing. I was already nervous. I was already a little bit apprehensive about this new season of my life. And so I got on this plane, and then I got sick, and then I got carried into the airport. I mean, at that moment of my life, I have never felt more alone. I just want you to let that word sink in just for a moment. Alone. Not lonely. I mean, some of you are to college this year, and it's different with all the COVID stuff going on and distance learning and virtual, and you're not sure how it worked in the first place, let alone this all new thing that we're doing. And so you've felt lonely, but alone goes beyond lonely. Lonely is an issue of proximity. Alone is a state of being. It's to the depth of your soul that you feel it. And so I needed to talk to somebody that morning. And so I went to the payphone and I dug some change out of my pocket, because that's how we used to do it. And I put some quarters in the phone and I dialed my mom. Of course I dialed my mom. Who else am I going to dial? I'm the youngest of 4 boys, right? I am mama's boy. And so I called my mom, and I got the answering machine. Not a voicemail, like a tape recorder, an answering machine. "Hello, you've reached the Eldred home. I'm sorry we're not here." My heart just sunk. I just wanted to talk to my mom. And so I made my next phone call, which you might think this should have been my first phone call, but it wasn't. My second phone call was to my fiance, and she was living in Minneapolis, and she was a first-year school teacher. And so I called her and dialed the phone and put in my next quarters, and I got her answering machine. "Hi, this is Cindy. I'm sorry I'm not here right now." My heart sunk. I wanted to connect with somebody I trusted, somebody who loved me, somebody I knew, somebody who knew me, somebody who had walked through life with me. Fast forward a number of years, I had been asked to go to a number of high schools in the area where I lived and talk about school violence. This school had done a play called Bang Bang, You're Dead. And the emotions that it evoked on a school shooting And we hear about that. I mean, it's not making the news as much today. I mean, because the news is being outshadowed by our world issues, but you've seen it, you've heard it. So maybe some of you have lived through it. You've experienced unhealthy unrest on a school campus before. And so I would go classroom to classroom to classroom and speak to students after they performed this play to make sure that mentally they were all okay. And in every room, I walked into the classroom, and on the board, in great big letters, I would write the word alone. A-L-O-N-E. And I would ask the student body, can anyone tell me about this word? Has anyone in this room ever felt alone? Can you describe it? And I heard words like dead inside, empty, invisible, worthless. You got a word? When I say the word alone, and don't be acting all tough like you've never felt alone. Because if you pretend you've never been alone, you're part of the problem. And you're a liar. We've all felt alone. It wasn't just on an airport in Louisville, Kentucky. I felt alone most of my life, to be honest with you. I've battled aloneness for 50 years now. I probably will continue to battle aloneness. And it's not because I'm unique or different. It's because I'm willing to admit it, because you can't fix what you don't admit. And alone has always been a problem. I came to the last class on the last day of the week that I spent on this one particular high school campus. And I did it again. I walked into the classroom and I wrote on the board, A-L-O-N-E. Can anybody tell me about this word? Crickets. Nothing. Not a sound. It's sitting there right in front of me, in the very first row, in the very first seat, was a young man who I knew the moment I laid eyes on him did not belong, did not feel significant, did not know he mattered, didn't know why he was there. And I bet some of those words and phrases describe how you felt before. You don't know you matter, or you know someone across the hall or in a different dorm or down the street from where you lived, or a different locker when you were in high school, or someone in your home who didn't know they mattered, didn't know they were significant, didn't fit in, didn't know why they were there. This young man was a special ed student, special education student who had been put into this class all by himself, no peers, and in the front row as a spectacle for all to see. And I'm sure he had his share of people picking on him and belittling him and marginalizing him and making fun of him. And as I sat there and looked at him, I could see tears, huge tears, just welling up in his eyes. And if I would have just poked him, he'd have leaked instantly. But he wasn't just beginning to cry, he was beginning to shake just a little bit. He was shaking his desk just a little bit, and I was getting a little concerned for him. And honestly, since I was in the front row with him, I was a little concerned for me. And I just said, hey, buddy, you ever felt alone? You want to tell me about that word? And like an explosion, he jumps up, he knocks his books off his desk, he kicks his desk over, and he stands up and he yells at the top of his lungs, "Alone sucks!" And he ran out of the room. And there was no laughter. And there was no noise. And there was no further teaching or explanation needed from me. For in that moment, that boy who didn't belong became the expert, and everybody understood the depth of their own emotion of what it felt like to be alone. Now, we shouldn't be shocked. We should not be shocked that alone evokes so much emotion, because it was in the very beginning. It's the first revelation that God ever gave humankind that something was wrong. The very first time God ever revealed a new truth to humankind was when he said, "It is not good for the man to be alone." Genesis 2:18. You've probably heard that verse at a wedding, just before people kiss, and then we eat cake and then dance, right? That's the only time we ever talk about that verse. But if it weren't so important, it wouldn't be the first revelation God ever gave us, and yet we've ignored it since the beginning of time. And so the issues that we are dealing with, that I'm dealing with, I bet that you're dealing with, and people you know are dealing with, the increase of depression and anxiety and suicide. And those are the biggies. They're just people pretending to be somebody they're not on social media, looking to fit in. Because you weren't designed, by the way, to fit in. You were made to belong, to feel good in your skin, to know who you are. But we fake it. We pose. We pretend for someone to simply notice me, like me, listen to me, for God's sake, love me. See, as you begin a new school year, there's so many challenges that you're going to face, and people who are going to give you challenges of things to do. Our world is a mess. It's not just a mess in 2020. It's not just a mess because of COVID. It's been a mess for a very long time. And I think it's because we all have a common cancer: aloneness. And everything else we deal with is a symptom of that disease. Your roommate, the person down the hall, the person across campus, the person on the other side of the video screen giving the lecture, your profs, your classmates, people you left behind at home. Think about the issues they deal with in their life. And if you knew that the whole issue and the cause of their struggle was the cancer of aloneness, and all you had to do was root out the aloneness and the symptoms would take care of themselves, you would do everything you could to cure that if you knew it was a deadly disease. And by the way, it is a deadly disease. So like, if I have a cold and I just keep wiping and blowing my nose, do I get rid of my cold? Well, of course not. That's foolish. I've got to get to the root cause of the issue. I've got to figure out what's causing the pain, causing these problems, causing the discomfort. Where's the symptoms coming from? The challenge before your generation, which is such an opportunity. The challenge before you this school year, because you're looking to say, do I matter? And listen, that's just you and I here in the camera. Let's not pretend that you don't have moments of doubt of who am I? Why am I here? Why do I exist? Does my life mean anything? Am I going to make a difference? Am I going to leave a legacy someday? You are. If you just remove people's aloneness, how do you do that? There's a story about a man walking down a street one night, and he falls into a hole. Why he's there, I don't know, but he's tripped and fallen into a hole, and it's dark and it's wet and it's rainy and it's stormy, and the wind is blowing the rain sideways, kind of like my morning on a plane in Lansing, Michigan. And he's sitting in the bottom of this hole. He has clawed and climbed and tried to get his way out, to no luck whatsoever. And he hears somebody up above, and he says, "Hey, are you up there? Could you come down and help me?" And so he peers down the hole, this man walking up above, and it's a pastor. And the guy says, "Pastor, thank God it's you. Could you help me out of my hole?" He goes, "What are you doing down there?" Which, by the way, what are you doing and why are you down there is a really dumb question when somebody's struggling. It's not about why, it's just a matter of noticing. What are you going to do for him? So the pastor says, absolutely. He writes down a prayer and he pitches the prayer in the hole. He says, "God bless you," and he goes on his way. And so now the young man is in the hole with a prayer. Don't get me wrong, I believe in the power of prayer. But faith without works is stupid, right? And so he's down there now in a hole, wet, cold, hungry, with a prayer. And he hears more commotion up above. And he yells, "Hey, is anyone up there? Could you help me?" And the doctor looks over the hole and goes, "What are you doing down there?" Remember? Dumb question. Most people ever don't plan to trip and fall into a hole in their life and get themselves in a mess. Most of the time it's not planned. It's not on purpose. It just happens. He says, "Doc, I've fallen in this hole. I don't know how to get out. And so, I've got a prayer, but could you give me something else?" And he says, "Absolutely." And he writes out a prescription and he pitches it in the hole. And so now he's got a prescription and a prayer. Which, by the way, are we shocked that we're the most medicated country in the world with the highest issues of depression? But we're medicated. We've got prescriptions and prayers in our holes. He's still there. He's still in this hole with a prescription and a prayer. And he's about ready to give up when there's a voice up above yelling, "Hey, Tim, are you down there? Is that you?" "Yeah." "What do you, dude, I knew you would be there." Whenever you get in this kind of situation, you can always go to the same hole. You hide. You walk away. You isolate. You put on all this, attitude that everything's okay. It's still a hole. The hole doesn't have to be dark. It's dark inside, but sometimes it's just hiding from reality that I've hit rock bottom. And I say, "Hey, could you help me out of the hole?" And my friend up there jumps in the hole with me. I say, "What is wrong with you, man? You jumped now we're both down here." And he says, "Yeah, but that's okay. I've been in this hole before. And I know the way out." See, if you want to be whole this year, you've got to help somebody out of their hole. And if you're in a hole, you know how you get out of a hole? You find somebody in a deeper hole. There's somebody always looking for your help, for your love, for your action. And sometimes, though, in the world that we live, with all the information we're giving, we keep hearing and get inundated with all this bad news, and we get apathetic, and we don't need more apathy, we need empathy. And empathy is sympathy in action. It's when I don't just feel bad for something, I do something about it. And listen, it's not about protesting and marching and yelling and screaming. It's about relationships. It's about the gospel. It's literally, Genesis 2 is about the gospel. It's about God having a relationship and wanting to be so connected to his creation. Not only then, but he sends Jesus. And I just want you to look at with me at Philippians chapter 2, verse 5. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God did not consider equality with God something to be grasped or taken advantage of. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking on the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. You know what he did? He got in our hole. He related to us by being one of us. Listen, I know you felt alone. Alone sucks. It's deep, it's dark, it's depressing, and it's completely curable. You are the cure for the crises that we are facing today. This year, if you want to change the world, if you're looking for a mission and a ministry, you don't have to look to some huge event or some huge project or some massive mission or ministry. Find somebody hurting. Get in their hole. Help them. Start an empathy epidemic on your campus this year so that no one ever has to feel alone.
Thanks, Tim, for that timely message. I think the sense of loneliness is something that we can all feel a little bit of because we've, since March, have been doing things online, doing things in smaller groups, distancing ourselves from others. And as we're 3 weeks into the semester, it's timely for us to think about this kind of message. So in response to his message, I just have a few questions. The first two are go together. So what things keep us from asking others for help, and what things keep us from reaching out to others to offer help? I think we can get into a routine within especially our current situation where we go to class, go to work, go to the library, go to get food, and then we go back to our room because it's comfortable there. We can take off our mask and do our thing. But I think that builds into this isolation and builds into that loneliness, especially when we maybe have a tendency to feel alone already. And so while Spring Arbor community is a great community, it's a great place to be, isolation can still happen, especially in the current pandemic. So I'd like to encourage you to be intentional over the next couple of weeks in building relationships, not just with the people you are comfortable with, but think about how the people you are comfortable with might invite others into that sphere of influence. Don't just give in to the routine of going to this thing and then that thing and then going back to your room. Don't wait for the student government and others to organize activities for you. Organize one yourself. Grab your friends and invite others to be a part of some small gathering or some event here on campus. Don't wait for others to ask you to have a meal. Invite someone else to have a meal together in the DC, or grab your food and sit outside and enjoy the last few days of fall that we might have before the weather turns inclement. So the choice is ours as a community to either choose to be intentional and build relationships, or surrender to the pattern that can happen where we isolate from one another and isolate ourselves and fall into that pit where the sense of loneliness may sink in. So this is a great place to be, and we have a chance to make a difference in other people's lives. So join me in doing that intentional work today. Thanks for joining. Have a great day.